For 22 years, my mother-in-law sent me a postcard every single time she traveled. Not a text message, not an email, a real postcard with a stamp, with her handwriting on the back, addressed to me, not to her son, not to both of us. To me. I have a box of them on the top shelf of my bedroom closet. A shoebox, the kind that holds a pair of boots. I put the first one in there in the spring of 2001, and I kept putting them in after that, one after another, until there were so many I had to press the lid down to close it. Her name was Dorothy. Everyone called her Dot. She was 71 years old when she died, and she had been to 34 states, 9 countries, and 1 cruise she said she would never repeat because the buffet gave her food poisoning somewhere in the Caribbean. She told me all of this in person, over the phone, at holidays. She was not a quiet woman. But I never read the backs of her postcards. I want you to understand that before I go any further, because people are going to ask the way people always ask when they hear this story. They're going to say, "How do you not read the back of a postcard?" And I need to explain it because it matters. When the first postcard arrived, my husband, Richard, brought it in from the mailbox. He handed it to me face down, so I saw her handwriting first. For Margaret, it said at the top. And then, below the address, there were a few lines I started to read. And Richard said, over his shoulder, already walking toward the kitchen, "That's just my mother being my mother." And something about the way he said it, the dismissal in it, the casual certainty that whatever she had written wasn't worth stopping for, made me set it down. I put it in the shoebox because I intended to read it later, when I wasn't being watched, when there was no one to roll their eyes at me for caring. Later never came. I'm 63 years old. I know how that sounds. I know what you're thinking. But I need you to understand what 22 years of marriage looks like from the inside, because it doesn't look the way it looks from the outside. From the outside, it looks like a choice. From the inside, it feels like a current. You're moving, always moving, and you don't realize how far you've drifted until something stops you. Dorothy stopped me. She died on a Tuesday in November. A stroke, sudden, the way the doctors always say it, like that's supposed to be a comfort. She had been in Florida visiting her sister, and she just didn't wake up. My husband flew down alone. He said there was no reason for me to go, that it would only be family matters, paperwork. I stayed home and I didn't argue, because by that point there were so many things I didn't argue about that one more barely registered. I went to her house a few weeks later with my sister-in-law Carol and 2 large boxes from the hardware store, because someone had to go through Dorothy's things and Carol couldn't do it alone. We spent 3 days there. We folded her sweaters. We wrapped her dishes in newspaper. We argued gently over who should take the blue armchair and who should take the reading lamp, and neither of us wanted to be the one to throw away her handwriting. She had handwriting like a school teacher, neat and slightly forward-leaning, every letter the same height as the one before it. I found the postcards on her desk. Not the ones she'd sent me. Different ones. These were organized, bound with rubber bands in small stacks. Travel postcards she'd never mailed, the kind you buy from a spinning rack in a gift shop. I thought at first she was collecting them. Then Carol said, quietly, from across the room, she kept copies. I didn't know what she meant. She sent you one every time she went somewhere, Carol said, and she kept a copy for herself to remember what she wrote. That's just how she was. I drove home with 4 boxes of things that had belonged to Dorothy, and I went upstairs and I stood in front of my closet for a long time before I opened it. The shoebox was exactly where I'd left it. I sat down on the edge of the bed and I opened it and I took out the postcard on the very top. It was from Savannah, Georgia. There was a picture of a Spanish moss-covered street on the front, the kind of photograph that makes a place look like a dream. I turned it over. She had written, "Margaret, I passed a little bookstore here today that reminded me of you. The woman behind the counter had your same way of listening. I hope you're reading something good. I hope you're resting. You always look a little tired when I see you. Not the ordinary kind. Love, Dot." I set it down on the bed beside me. I picked up the next one, Portland, Oregon. The front showed Mount Hood in the distance, snow-capped and very far away. I turned it over. "Margaret, Richard mentioned you asked about going back to work, and he said he talked you out of it. I didn't say anything at dinner. I'm saying it here. You should go back to work if you want to. That's your decision. Don't let anyone talk you out of the things that are yours to decide. Love, Dot." My hands were not shaking yet, but something behind my sternum was shifting, like furniture being moved in a room I hadn't been inside in a very long time. I picked up the next one, Santa Fe, New Mexico. "Margaret, I had lunch with an old friend of Richard's today. I won't say who, it doesn't matter. And he mentioned running into Richard in Dallas last spring. Richard told me he was in Columbus that week. I don't know what to do with that. I'm not sure you do either, but I want you to know that I see more than he thinks I see. You are not imagining things. Love, Dot." I put the card down. I sat very still. I picked it back up and I read it again. Dallas. Richard had told me he was in Columbus visiting a client. I remembered because I had called him at the hotel and he hadn't answered, and he told me later that he'd been at a dinner that ran late. I remembered because I had that particular memory filed in the folder I kept in the back of my mind. The folder I tried not to open, the one that held all the small things that hadn't added up over the years. I reached into the box and took out a handful of postcards and spread them across the bedspread, and I began to read them in no particular order, just reaching and reading, reaching and reading. San Antonio. "Margaret, I'm worried about the account you mentioned at Christmas. The one Richard said was for house repairs. My son is many things, but he was never a home improvement man. Be careful with what's yours. Nashville. Margaret, I know it isn't my place, but I've been your mother-in-law for 18 years, and I love you. And loving someone means sometimes you write it on the back of a postcard and hope they eventually turn it over. Asheville. The lawyer here is a woman named Patricia Brennan. I met her at my friend Louise's retirement party. I wrote her number on a piece of paper, and I put it in the bottom of the shoebox, under everything else. I hope you never need it. I hope you do find it." I stopped. I dumped the shoebox out onto the bed. There, under 22 years of postcards, folded in half, was a piece of Dorothy's stationery, her address printed at the top in small blue letters. And below it, in her schoolteacher handwriting, Patricia Brennan, family law, a phone number with an Asheville area code. And below that, one more line. You deserve to know what your life actually is, sweetheart. That's all I ever wanted to give you. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the light in the room to change. Long enough for my tea to go cold on the nightstand. Long enough to read every postcard twice. When I was done, I had a picture. Not a complete one. Postcards don't hold that much, but enough. Enough to see the shape of the thing. Richard had been hiding money. Not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily. The way water carves stone. Small transfers out of joint accounts. An investment account I hadn't known existed. A property. Dorothy had heard this from someone. She wrote it carefully. I heard this. I can't be certain. A property in a name I didn't recognize. He had done it over years. Quietly. With the confidence of a man who had never once been questioned. And Dorothy had watched. She had watched, and she had not known what to do because he was her son, and I was her daughter-in-law, and there is no clean way to sit in the middle of that. So she had done the only thing she could think of. She had written it down. She had sent it to me, one postcard at a time, hoping I would read it. And when the years passed, and I never said anything, because I never read them, because I didn't know, she had started to keep copies, duplicates, rubber banded on her desk. Her own archive of everything she'd tried to tell me. She died with those copies still on her desk, still waiting. I thought about her sitting in gift shops, spinning the postcard racks, choosing photographs she thought I would like. Spanish moss for me because she knew. I loved the South. A snowy mountain because I'd once told her I wanted to see Oregon. A turquoise sky over Santa Fe because she said my kitchen was painted almost that color. And she thought it would make me smile. Every postcard chosen for me, specifically. Everyone carrying something on its back that she needed me to know. I cried for a long time for Dorothy, for myself, for all the years between us that we spent on pleasantries, at dinner while she held all of this in her hands, and I held my fork and we talked about the weather and whether the rolls needed more time in the oven. In the morning, I called Patricia Brennan. I want to be careful about how much I say here, because some of it is still private, and some of it still has my name attached to documents I'd rather not read again. But I will tell you this. Patricia Brennan was exactly the kind of lawyer Dorothy had hoped she would be. Methodical, unimpressed by charm, not the kind of woman who gets confused by transfers that happen to fall just below a reporting threshold. She found the account. She found the property. She found 3 years of patterns that, once you saw them laid out in a spreadsheet, were impossible to look away from. Richard had not been hiding money from me all at once. He had been doing it the way a person does something they know is wrong, carefully, in pieces, in the hope that no single piece would ever be large enough to see. My attorney said she'd rarely seen documentation so useful as what Dorothy had left. Not the postcards themselves. Those were letters, personal, not legally binding. But the dates, the names, the timeline Dorothy had carefully recorded gave us somewhere to look. It gave us a map. The divorce took 14 months. I am not going to pretend it was clean or painless, or that there weren't nights I sat at the kitchen table at 2 a.m, wondering how I had spent 22 years not knowing what my own life actually was. There were a lot of those nights, but I also want to tell you what happened after, because I think this is the part that matters most. I kept the house, not because of sentiment. I've since sold it and moved to a smaller place near my sister that has a porch and a garden and light in every room in the afternoon. I kept it because it was mine, because we had bought it together, and I had poured 22 years into its walls, and I was not going to leave with nothing. I kept it, and then I let it go when I was ready. And that difference between leaving because you have to and leaving because you choose to is everything. I went back to work, part-time, consulting for a nonprofit that does work I actually care about. Richard had talked me out of going back 3 times over the years. Each time I'd convinced myself he was right, that it wasn't the right moment, that we didn't need the income, that I was needed more at home. I see those conversations differently now. I see a lot of things differently now. I framed one of Dorothy's postcards, the one from Savannah, the first one, the one about the bookstore and the woman who listened and the ordinary tired that wasn't ordinary. It's on my desk in my new house, next to a photograph of Dorothy at Carol's wedding, laughing at something just outside the frame. She has her head thrown back. She looks completely delighted. I think about her in those gift shops. I think about her choosing photographs and standing at the postcard rack, turning the cards over to write on the back, folding her notes just right so they'd fit in the lines provided. I think about her dropping them in the mail, and then coming home and writing a duplicate and adding it to the stack on her desk. She never told me she'd been doing it. In all those years, at all those dinners, she never once said, "I've been trying to reach you. I've been writing it down." I used to wonder why she didn't just call me, why she didn't sit me down and say it out loud plainly, the way I might have done. But I've thought about it long enough now that I think I understand. She was his mother. She had loved him first. She was not willing to be the person who blew up her son's marriage, but she was also not willing to say nothing. A postcard is not a declaration. A postcard is a small thing, easy to ignore, easy to dismiss if the person finds it and gets angry, easy to explain as just something I wrote while I was traveling. It was the only way she knew to tell me the truth without making herself the one who told it. She gave me 22 years of postcards, and she trusted me to turn them over. I wish I had turned them over sooner. I wish I'd read the one from Santa Fe in the year it was written and had 14 more years to do something about it. I wish I'd had more time with Dorothy, knowing what she'd done, so I could have told her that I found it, that I understood, that I was going to be okay. But I also know that I found them when I was ready. There is something in me that believes that. I was 61 years old, sitting on my bed, reading a shoebox full of postcards, and for the first time in longer than I could measure, someone was telling me the truth. It arrived late, but it arrived. I opened the box when I needed to. Dorothy made sure it was there. A few months after the divorce was finalized, I drove down to see Carol. We had dinner at her kitchen table, the same way we'd had dinner at Dorothy's kitchen table. And at some point, Carol said, "She worried about you, for years." I said I knew. Carol said, "She never thought he deserved you, from the beginning." I asked why she never said so. Carol was quiet for a minute. Then she said it in her own way. I nodded. I thought about postcard racks in gift shops. I thought about a piece of stationery folded in half and pressed to the bottom of a shoebox. I thought about 34 states and 9 countries, and a cruise she hated, and all the miles she traveled while carrying something on her back. She was trying to give to me. She said it in her own way. I have her address book now. Carol gave it to me because she said Dorothy would have wanted me to have it. Patricia Brennan's name is not in it. She must have kept that number elsewhere, kept it separate, kept it only for me. But the book is filled with Dorothy's handwriting, page after page of names and addresses and phone numbers in that forward-leaning script. On the inside front cover, she wrote a quote. I don't know where it's from. I've looked it up and I can't find it. So maybe she wrote it herself. The truth is not always the loudest thing in the room. Sometimes it is the thing that waits. I read that and I thought, yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly what she did. She waited. She sent her postcards. She kept her copies. She waited for me to turn one over and find her there, on the back, where she'd been all along. I talk to her now sometimes. I know that sounds strange for a woman my age, but I'll be sitting on my porch in the afternoon when the light comes through. The way it does in October, and I'll say out loud, I read them, Dot. I read everyone. And I think she knows. I really do. Some people come into your life loudly. They announce themselves. They take up space. They make sure you know they're there. Dorothy was not that kind of person. Or rather, she was that kind of person in every other way. In person, at dinner, on the phone. But her truest self, the part of her that loved me most, she kept quiet. She kept it on the backs of postcards. She kept it in a shoebox on a shelf. She was waiting for me to be ready. I'm ready now. I've been ready for 2 years. My garden is coming in well this spring, and I have a part-time job I find meaningful. And I sleep through the night, which I hadn't done in longer than I could remember. And I have a shoebox of postcards that I keep not on a shelf in a closet, but on my coffee table, where I can see it. Some days I open it and take one out at random, just to read her handwriting, just to hear her voice. She was right about the bookstore in Savannah. I do have her same way of listening. I found that out late, but I found it.